What if one day you were asked to leave the very seat you paid for, just because you don't look like someone who belongs there? What would you do? Get angry, argue back, or stay silent, letting the world hear its own absurdity echo back at itself? On an Apex Air flight from New York to San Diego, Dr. Maya Lewis, an African-American CEO, just wanted a peaceful trip home after a long meeting. But the moment she settled into seat 1A in first class, a doubtful stare from head flight attendant Rachel Holt froze the entire cabin. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" A question that seemed harmless, yet triggered a chain of events that would make the entire airline bow its head in shame. In just 6 minutes, the line between power and prejudice was turned upside down. A single plane ticket became a test for the whole system, between bias and truth. Which side would you choose? If it were you, would you stay calm and silent, or would you react, just like the world always does? Join me in the story of Dr. Maya Lewis, where justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to stand still and let the truth speak for itself. If you believe that respect should never depend on skin color or clothing, hit that like, share, and subscribe, and together, let's witness the power of silent justice. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where it felt like the whole world was silently asking you, does this person really belong here? It's not a question they say out loud, but one that lingers in their eyes, thickening the air between two breaths. That morning, Dr. Maya Lewis just wanted a peaceful flight from New York to San Diego. She wore a simple white linen shirt, black slacks, her hair neatly tied up, and low-heeled shoes. No designer brands, no show of status, just the neat, composed look of someone used to long flights and endless meetings. Her seat was 1A first class, by the window, where she could glance at the sky and jot down notes for her project. Clear Horizon, a corporate ethics reform program she'd been developing. When Maya placed her small leather bag into the overhead bin, she didn't notice the suspicious gaze locking onto her back. Standing a few feet away was Rachel Holt, the head flight attendant on Apex Air Flight 247. Rachel had worked in first class for over a decade, surrounded by expensive suits, Rolex watches, and Hermes bags, the silent symbols of the kind of people she believed belonged in this cabin. But that black woman didn't fit the picture. Rachel stepped forward, her tone polite, but her eyes carrying a question she didn't bother to hide. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you sure this is your seat? This one's 1A? Maya looked up and smiled just enough to seem courteous, but not enough to seem submissive. "Yes, 1A. Here's my ticket." She held out her phone, the screen glowing with her name, Dr. Maya Lewis. Rachel glanced at it, frowning slightly. There was something in her eyes not searching for a mistake, but searching for a reason to doubt. I'll just check the system real quick. There might be a mix-up. From behind, a few first-class passengers began to notice. An older man, Greg Sullivan, smirked. Maybe she thought this was business class. The laugh was quiet, but it changed the color of the air. Maya stayed still, said nothing, just rested her hands on her knees and looked out the window. A junior flight attendant, Ethan Cole, was called over by Rachel to verify the ticket. He typed in the code on his tablet and froze when the screen flashed duplicate seat, 1A. Rachel sighed, her tone tightening. "See system error. Looks like 1A's been assigned to another passenger. I'll need you to step back for a moment while we sort this out." And in that instant, every eye in the cabin seemed to turn toward Maya. Was she a black woman sitting in the wrong seat? Or was the system wrong? A technical question on the surface, but one weighted with a history of buried prejudice. Clara Nguyen, Maya's Vietnamese-American assistant sitting in row 2, had seen it all. She stood up calmly. "This is a valid ticket. I'm the one who booked it, for Dr. Lewis. It's likely a crew override error." Rachel shook her head, voice quieter but sharper. "I understand, but I still need to confirm. Airline policy doesn't allow." She stopped mid-sentence, but her eyes finished it. "For her doesn't allow people like her to sit here." For a few seconds, the first-class cabin designed for comfort and calm felt suffocating. Maya still didn't move. She looked directly at Rachel, not with anger, but with a calm, piercing gaze, the kind of look that seemed to take notes for a behavioral case study. Across the aisle, Noah Carter, a freelance journalist, had started recording. He sensed that something bigger than a technical issue was unfolding, a system revealing the truth it had long tried to hide. Rachel grabbed her radio, speaking curtly to the ground crew. Her tone carried irritation, the kind that comes when someone feels their authority being quietly challenged. "Could you please wait in the back while I handle this?" Maya tilted her head slightly. "I think I'll stay right here. We can all wait for the results. Can't we?" Her voice was soft, even, but each word landed like a small, deliberate stone on the table. For a second, Rachel hesitated. She wasn't used to this kind of response. Not anger, not pleading, but composed authority, the kind that made her feel smaller. Clara leaned toward Ethan. "Can you check the override log in the crew system?" Ethan looked at Maya, then Rachel, uncertain. But something in Maya's steady gaze made him nod. "Yeah, let me check." He entered a few commands. Then the screen displayed a short line, "Manual override by crew IDR, Holt." Silence fell like a weight across the cabin. Ethan swallowed hard. The error didn't come from the passenger. "Ma'am, it's from a manual override, under your ID." Rachel went pale. "It must be a mistake. I didn't." But before she could finish, a passenger chuckled softly. Greg Sullivan, again this time quieter, but no less cutting. "Maybe next time, double-check before you accuse someone." No one spoke after that. Maya simply looked ahead, her eyes gleaming with something no one could quite name, not pride, not anger, just a cold, clear light, like metal catching the sun. In her mind, a single thought echoed. When the system fails, it always blames the ones who don't belong to it. Then, the cockpit door opened. Captain James Porter stepped out, having heard the commotion. When his eyes fell on Maya, he froze, his expression shifting from surprise to recognition. "Dr. Lewis, is that really you?" Rachel blinked, confused. "You know her?" The captain nodded slowly. "Know her. She's the one who helped us design Apex Air's internal digital infrastructure. If it weren't for her, these flights might not even be as safe as they are today." No one breathed. Maya spoke softly, so quietly her words seemed to dissolve into the air. "When we land, we'll talk." It wasn't a command, but somehow it carried the weight of one, and the cabin fell into complete silence. To be continued. Part 2. What no one knew was that the next 6 minutes, just 6 minutes, would turn this flight into the biggest storm in Apex Air's history. A camera turned on. A single sentence got recorded. And from that moment, justice began to speak. 6 minutes, just enough time for a plane to reach cruising altitude, or for a person to realize their true worth in a world full of prejudice. The first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 247 fell into silence after the captain stepped away. But it wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace. It was thick, heavy, filled with shame, suspicion, and something quietly burning beneath the surface of civility. Rachel Holt, the head flight attendant, tried to keep her composure. She turned to Ethan Cole, who was still fumbling with his tablet. "Ethan, check the system again. Seat 1A's showing a duplicate assignment. Could be a glitch or someone tampered with the ticket." Her tone was sharp, brisk, as if trying to bury her personal discomfort under a layer of professionalism. Ethan re-entered the code. A red alert blinked on the screen duplicate seat. Conflict detected. He glanced at Dr. Maya Lewis. She was still seated, hands resting gently on her lap, eyes turned toward the window. Morning light spilled across half her face, calm, unshaken, without the faintest trace of anger. She didn't need to say a word, and somehow that silence, that unbothered stillness, made Rachel even more uneasy. "You see," Rachel said, voice clipped, "the system's showing an error. We need to clarify this before takeoff." From seat 1B, Greg Sullivan, the silver-haired man in a gray suit, let out a dry chuckle. "Maybe she borrowed someone's ticket. Or what a hacker." The words cut through the cabin like a thin, cold blade. Maya turned her head toward him. No fury, no sarcasm, just a direct, unflinching look, the kind that forces the other person to see themselves reflected in it. Greg hesitated for a split second, but pride, the kind that thrives on being served, wouldn't let him back down. "Well, we all know first class isn't cheap," he continued, voice half joking, half serious. "Funny how anyone can just sit here these days with an e-ticket." From row 2, Clara Nguyen leaned forward. Her voice was calm, but clear. "Mr. Sullivan, her name is on the ticket. If there's an error, it's the system's, not the passenger's." Rachel forced a smile. "I'm just following procedure." "Ma'am?" Maya finally spoke, her voice low and even. "Procedures exist to protect people, not to hurt them." A pause. Her tone wasn't loud, wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. At the back of the cabin, Noah Carter, the freelance journalist, had quietly pulled out his phone. He wasn't the type to chase drama, but instinct told him this moment mattered. Not to humiliate anyone, but to preserve the truth before someone tried to erase it. The red light on his camera flicked on. Rachel noticed, snapping. "Sir, please turn off your camera." "This is a private area," Noah replied evenly. "I'll stop recording the moment I see that no one here is being treated unfairly." His words sparked through the air like static. Several passengers looked away, ashamed. They didn't want to get involved, but deep down, they knew they'd just witnessed something wrong. Ethan was still typing, trying to trace the system error. He sighed. "Ms. Holt? Looks like the system was overridden manually under a crew ID, maybe a mistyped entry." Rachel shot him a quick look, trying to mask her unease. "Just a minor glitch. I'll report it to tech later." But before she could finish, Noah stepped closer, phone still steady. "Sorry, did you just say the override came from a crew ID? Meaning?" "It wasn't the passenger's fault." Rachel clenched her jaw. "You don't have the right to question me." The tension in the cabin thickened. Maya still said nothing, her eyes calm. Bright met Ethan's, and something in that gaze made his heart beat faster. He murmured, barely audible, "This job taught me to serve people, but sometimes I wish I had the courage to serve the truth." Clara leaned forward, placing a light hand on Maya's shoulder, a silent message. "You're not alone." Maya smiled, a tiny curve of her lips so small it could be mistaken for a breath. Rachel turned sharply to Ethan. "Lock the error log. No one else needs to see the internal record." Ethan froze. "But that's part of our duty." Maya looked at him and said softly, "Honesty is a form of courage, too." Those words hung in the air. Ethan inhaled deeply, then quietly saved a backup copy of the log into the secondary system. No one spoke, but everyone knew. This wasn't about a seat anymore. Greg cleared his throat, trying to cut the tension. "Come on, folks. We're just a few minutes delayed. No need to make this a big deal," Clara replied, her eyes locked on Rachel. "A few minutes of delay isn't a problem, but when respect gets delayed, that's a problem for the whole system." Silence. Again. Only this time, it carried the weight of truth. Ethan looked toward the cockpit door, hesitant. "I think the captain should know about this." Rachel spun around. "I'm responsible for this section. The captain doesn't need to be bothered, but fate doesn't wait for permission." Just then, the cockpit door swung open. Captain James Porter appeared, calm face, steady eyes, but there was something different in his gaze. He looked at Maya, gave a slow nod, and in that moment, Rachel realized she'd made a mistake far greater than she thought. The cabin fell silent again. The engines hummed softly beneath the tension. Maya nodded slightly toward Clara, a quiet signal. "The truth will come out, not through words, but through what happens next." Noah turned off his camera, but his eyes stayed on Rachel. He knew that what he'd captured wasn't just a video. It was a mirror, one that the entire industry would be forced to look into. Maya turned back toward the window. The sunlight outside was stronger now. The clouds were parting as if even the sky itself had chosen to stand on the side of light. It seemed the situation had calmed once the captain appeared, but Maya knew this was only the surface. Behind that duplicate seat error lay a deeper flaw, a system where policy was used to disguise prejudice, and she was ready to go all the way to expose it. There are moments when people don't speak to reveal the truth, they speak to protect their trembling ego. Rachel Holt, the lead flight attendant on Apex Air Flight 247, was living that moment. The air in first class felt vacuumed out. After Captain James Porter stepped in and recognized Dr. Maya Lewis, Rachel forced a strained smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched a tiny tell of fear hiding behind pride. "Captain," she said, trying to sound composed, "this passenger, there's an issue with her ticket. The system flagged a duplicate seat. I was just following procedure." Captain Porter gave a slow nod, saying nothing more. His eyes shifted toward Maya, eyes that silently carried an apology someone else couldn't say. Maya calmly held out her ID and electronic boarding pass. "Everything's here all by the book." Her tone was steady, void of blame or accusation, only a quiet authority that made others tread carefully. Rachel glanced quickly at the screen, then at Maya as if searching for a crack in her story. "You could have edited that e-ticket. We've seen that happen before." The entire cabin stirred. That wasn't a procedural check anymore. It was an accusation. And underneath it, the quiet sting of racism. A black woman accused of fraud, simply because she dared to sit in first class. Noah Carter, still filming discreetly, lowered his phone, but kept the camera rolling. He studied Rachel for a long second before speaking softly, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you doubting her because of the system error? Or because she doesn't fit your idea of what first class looks like?" Rachel flushed red. "You don't have the right to question me. I'm following policy." From the row behind, Clara Nguyen spoke gently, her voice like a soft wind, but every word clear. "Policy never asks us to lose our humanity." That sentence landed heavy. A few passengers lowered their eyes. In rooms of privilege, silence is the easiest way to stay comfortable. But today, silence meant complicity. Rachel took a step back, clutching her radio. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call airport security. We can't risk flight safety. Safety? Procedure? Policy?" The words rolled out like armor, but underneath was fear. The fear of someone realizing she wasn't in control anymore. Maya looked at her not with anger, but with quiet clarity. "You can call security if that makes you feel safe. But I also have the right to be treated with respect as a paying passenger." A long pause. Ethan Cole finally spoke, voice low but firm. "Rachel, if the error came from a crew override, calling security isn't necessary." Rachel whipped around. Sharper now. "Ethan, you don't understand how serious this could be. Anyone can fake an ID. A boarding pass, say whatever they want." From across the aisle, Greg Sullivan chuckled the kind of laugh that grated like metal. Maybe Ethan's got a point. But hey, these days anyone can call themselves doctor. He snorted, smug, his laugh echoing like a coin dropped on steel. Maya didn't flinch. She leaned forward, opened her bag, and pulled out an ID card. Apex Ethics Council, her name engraved clearly. Dr. Maya Lewis, Senior Advisor, Ethics and Compliance Division. She placed it on the folding table between the seats. Her voice was soft, almost conversational. "I'm not just a passenger. I'm one of the consultants who helped write the very policies you're referring to." The cabin froze. Rachel stood motionless. Ethan swallowed hard. Greg's smirk vanished. Noah tapped the stop button on his camera, not because it was over, but because he knew what he'd just captured was enough. Justice had entered the frame quietly. Without raising its voice, Rachel forced another shaky smile. I didn't mean any disrespect. Dr. Lewis, I was just following the rules to ensure everyone's safety." Maya looked at her calm, deliberate. Policies are made to protect people, but when you use them to protect prejudice, they stop being policies and become masks for injustice. Silence. Only the hum of the engines filled the air, blending with the sound of uneasy breathing. Captain Porter cleared his throat. His tone was low, but resolute. "Rachel, there's no need for security here. I can personally confirm Dr. Lewis is a verified passenger and more than that. She's the one who helped this airline recover from last year's data breach." Rachel's head dropped slightly, her hand still clutching the radio. In that instant, the woman who once stood as a figure of authority looked suddenly small, shrunken beneath the weight of her own mistake. Maya didn't gloat. She knew systems don't fail because of one person. They fail because of all the people who stay silent when they do. And she wasn't going to stay silent anymore. She spoke quietly, almost like a whisper meant for herself. "I'm not angry. Rachel? But I won't overlook this, because if I stay silent, you'll believe this behavior is normal." Noah met her gaze through the lens, and in that moment, he understood. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes, it spoke softly in a voice steady enough to melt the ice in someone's heart. Rachel stepped back, her face a mix of guilt and fear. We can talk after landing. Doctor?" Louis Maya nodded slightly. "Yes, when we land." The words came again, familiar, calm. But this time, they weren't a promise. They were a declaration justice would land with this plane. Outside the window, the sky stretched endlessly blue. But inside the cabin, a quiet storm was forming, because when truth hides behind the mask of policy, it doesn't disappear. It waits for the right person at the right time to bring it to light. And that person was Maya. The first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 247 had fallen into a strange kind of quiet. No more whispers, no more curious stares, just a thick, Heavy silence. The kind that comes before something changes forever. After Rachel Holt threatened to call security, Dr. Maya Lewis didn't move. No argument, no pleading. She simply waited patient, composed as if she knew that truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds a way to breathe. From row 2, Clara Nguyen quietly opened her laptop. She wasn't someone who sought confrontation, but she also wasn't someone who bowed to injustice. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, logging into the internal Apex system one she still had access to as Maya's senior assistant. A few keystrokes later, a line of data appeared. Seat 1A. Status valid. Crew override detected. User ID Rolt. Clara inhaled sharply. Her heart raced, but her voice stayed steady. The error didn't come from the passenger. It came from the flight crew specifically. The head attendant's ID. The air inside the cabin cracked open. Ethan Cole, tablet still in hand, verified the entry. After a few tense seconds, he nodded. That's right. I just checked it. The system says manual override by crew IDR. Holt. That means seat 1A was temporarily locked by Rachel herself. Rachel froze. Her face drained of color. That's not possible. I followed procedure. I didn't. But before she could finish, Noah Carter, the independent journalist who'd been filming quietly all along, stepped closer, holding his phone chest high. The red recording light reflected in Rachel's eyes. In that instant, the truth was no longer in the data. It was in human behavior. And Rachel's next words sealed her fate. She snapped. Her voice cracked, sharp and ugly. You people always make everything difficult. Those 2 words. You people dropped into the air like a stone thrown into still water. The sound rippled through every soul in the cabin. Everyone heard it. And worse, Noah's camera captured all of it. Maya didn't flinch. She simply closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. Her gaze on Rachel wasn't angry. It was deeply, heartbreakingly sad. What did you just say? Clara asked, her voice trembling but clear. Rachel stammered, That's not what I meant. Ethan set down his tablet, his tone firm. There's no need to explain. Rachel, everything's been recorded. And it's clear, Dr. Lewis is a verified passenger. I'll be filing a report with ethics and safety the moment we land. Rachel's forced composure shattered. Sweat gathered on her forehead. She looked around, desperate for support. But Greg Sullivan, the first-class passenger who'd mocked Maya earlier, averted his eyes. He didn't dare speak because he knew defending her now meant exposing the worst in himself. Noah looked at Rachel and said quietly, no anger, no satisfaction, just truth. Sometimes, a single sentence can reveal an entire world we pretend doesn't exist. Rachel said nothing. She stood there still, pale a statue melting under the bright cabin light. Maya remained seated. No outburst, no victory smile, just calm. She reached out and placed her hand gently over Clara's, a silent gesture to keep the moment from turning chaotic. We don't need to argue, Maya said softly. The truth has already spoken. Her voice was low, steady like the calm surface of a lake after a storm. But beneath it was the weight of someone who'd endured far too much to need to shout any more. Captain James Porter stepped out once again, shame written across his face. Dr. Lewis, he said solemnly, on behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for what just happened. Maya nodded gently. I believe every system can fail. Captain, the real question is, do we have the courage to fix it? Clara closed her laptop, glancing at Rachel, not with anger, but pity. Ethan turned away, unable to meet Maya's gaze. burdened by guilt that he hadn't spoken sooner. Noah stopped recording. He lowered his camera and murmured softly, almost like a closing line for his story. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. It just needs a camera, and someone brave enough not to look away. No one spoke after that. Rachel sank into her seat, trembling hands clasped together. Outside. Sunlight streamed through the window of seat 1A, landing squarely on Maya's calm face. A woman who had just been insulted, yet chose silence, allowing the truth to echo louder than any voice could. The cabin seemed suspended in time. Only the hum of the engines remained steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a world learning, slowly, to breathe again through honesty. No one knew that just 6 minutes later. That video would spread across social media, becoming undeniable proof of a truth buried too long. And when the plane landed, the woman once told to leave her seat in 1A would be the one deciding the very future of the airline itself. Morning light streamed through the airplane window, washing over Dr. Maya Lewis's face. She sat there quiet, calm, not angry, not proud, just still, as if what had happened no longer surprised her. After Rachel Holt's slip of the tongue, the cabin froze in place. No one dared to speak. Even Greg Sullivan, who had laughed earlier, now stared down at his tie, suddenly realizing it felt far too tight. The truth was out, and everyone could feel it. This was no longer just about a seat. Ethan Cole still stood near the aisle, his hand trembling slightly as he held his tablet. He'd already confirmed that the crew override had come from Rachel herself, but something deeper stirred inside him. It felt like he was witnessing a lesson he'd remember for the rest of his life. Noah Carter, the journalist, lowered his phone. His fingers still shook. He knew that what he'd captured would soon become evidence of a moment where justice didn't need to scream, because the truth had spoken on its own. And then, cutting through the tense silence, the cockpit door opened. A calm, steady voice filled the air. "What's going on here?" It was Captain James Porter, commander of Apex Air Flight 247. He'd flown with thousands of passengers, seen every kind of conflict imaginable, but his face now carried a seriousness that told everyone this was different. Rachel stepped forward, her voice quivering but still clinging to protocol. "Captain, there's been a mix-up with the passenger in 1A. The system flagged a duplicate seat, and I was just following." Porter lifted a hand, signaling her to stop. He looked around, scanning the bowed heads of every first-class passenger, until his eyes landed on Maya. And in that single moment, his expression shifted. Recognition, shock, realization. "Wait," he murmured, eyes widening. "Dr. Lewis, is that really you?" Rachel blinked, confused. "Captain, you know her." Porter exhaled slowly, then let out a small, uneasy smile. "Know her. She's the one who helped build this company's digital foundation. Every system we use, from flight coordination to data security, was developed on her framework. If it weren't for Dr. Lewis, Apex Air might not have survived last year's data breach." The entire cabin fell dead silent. Rachel stood motionless, her hands dropped to her sides. Greg Sullivan looked up briefly, but couldn't bring himself to meet Maya's eyes. The woman they had doubted, questioned, and humiliated was the same woman who had saved the very company they worked for. Ethan's voice broke softly. I didn't know." Noah turned to Rachel, his tone gentle but cutting. "Maybe we all think we know how to judge people until the truth forces us to start over." Rachel stepped back, her lips trembling. "I didn't mean to. I was just doing my job." Maya looked at her, said nothing, didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just looked. And that was enough, because in that gaze, Rachel saw herself stripped of excuses, exposed, fragile, and wrong. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Maya remained seated in 1A, her posture poised, her hands resting neatly on her lap. Light from the window brushed across her cheek like a quiet halo. Finally, she spoke, voice soft, barely above a whisper. "It's all right. When we land, we'll talk. It wasn't a threat, and it wasn't forgiveness." It was the voice of someone who understood exactly where she stood and knew that justice doesn't need to rush. Clara closed her laptop, pride shining in her eyes. Ethan bowed his head. Captain Porter sighed deeply, turning toward Rachel. "Ms. Holt, I think you should take your seat. I'll handle the rest." Rachel nodded faintly, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked away, each step sharp and hollow, the sound of privilege crumbling beneath its own weight. When she disappeared behind the curtain, Maya turned to the window. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, calm, open, unbothered, a perfect contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded inside. Noah looked at her, his voice low. "You know, there are people who'll have to rethink the way they see the world after today." Maya smiled faintly. "That's all right. I didn't come here to make them afraid. I came to help them see." The sunlight traced a soft line along her cheek, drawing a quiet border between pain and forgiveness. Captain Porter nodded once, silently returning to the cockpit. He didn't need to say anything else. Everyone in that cabin had just learned a lesson no corporate training could ever teach. Clara whispered with genuine respect. "You didn't have to raise your voice, Dr. Lewis, and yet everyone heard you." Maya's smile deepened slightly. "That's how justice should sound, not shouted, but still loud enough to make people ashamed of their silence." The air in the cabin softened. Some passengers shifted in their seats, pretending to read or check their phones, but the shame lingered in their eyes, quiet and unmistakable. Maya exhaled slowly, centering herself again. She felt no triumph, no need for revenge. Only one thought lingered. If they can understand the pain behind a single doubtful glance, they'll never look at someone that way again. But the story didn't end with the truth being revealed. Just 6 minutes later, Noah's video would begin to spread across social media, igniting a wave where justice no longer belonged to the powerful, but to the millions watching. And when the plane touched down, the woman once told to leave seat 1A would be the one deciding the future of Apex Air itself. As Captain James Porter returned to the cockpit, first class slowly regained its order. But it wasn't peace. It was that uneasy quiet, the kind people use to pretend nothing happened. The engine still hummed. The sunlight still painted gold across the cabin walls. But inside every passenger, something had cracked. Dr. Maya Lewis remained in seat 1A, perfectly calm. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, her gaze fixed on the window. No anger, no triumph, because the truth, once revealed, doesn't need anyone to push it forward. It knows how to walk on its own. Across the aisle, Noah Carter, the journalist, stared down at his phone. The video he'd recorded ran exactly 6 minutes, not a frame too long. From the moment Rachel doubted Maya, to the second she uttered those two infamous words, "You people, no shouting, no violence, just raw, unfiltered prejudice captured in high definition." He didn't plan to post it right away, but the internet has its own rhythm, and sometimes so does justice. Before the plane had even begun to descend, the clip was already out. A passenger from the rear cabin, who'd noticed Noah filming, uploaded a short version with the headline, "Apex Air Attendant Accuses Black Woman of Stealing Her Own Seat." You won't believe who she is. Within an hour, the video hit 2 million views, and the comments began to flood in. What year is this? How is this still happening? Her composure is unbelievable. I could never stay that calm. Fire that attendant. Immediately. Meanwhile, Rachel Holt, who'd tried so hard to keep control, now sat paralyzed by dread. She didn't know the video had gone viral, but she could feel it. The air itself seemed to whisper consequences. Every time she walked past Maya, she avoided her eyes, as if afraid those eyes could see everything she was trying to hide. Maya said nothing more, only once, when Rachel set down a glass of water with trembling hands, did she speak softly, but with words sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "You don't need to be afraid of me, but don't think this ends here." Rachel froze. Her lips parted, but before she could reply, Maya turned back to the window, where pale sunlight stretched over the wing. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't revenge. It was the voice of silent justice, a reminder that justice doesn't end until understanding begins. From row 2, Clara Guyen unlocked her phone. Her notifications were exploding messages from colleagues, from friends in the tech industry. Dr. Maya Lewis was now trending worldwide. She showed the screen to Maya. "You're viral. Dr. Lewis." Maya glanced at it briefly, her face unreadable. "Justice that spreads like entertainment. Sometimes that makes me sad. Clara." Then she smiled faintly. "But if it helps people think, then maybe it's worth it." Noah turned around, voice low. "Sincere? I didn't film that moment to expose anyone. I filmed it to show that calm can be stronger than outrage." Maya nodded slowly. "You don't need to explain. The world needs to see this, not to condemn, but to finally learn how to listen." Rachel sat farther away now, clutching her radio like a lifeline. Her mind replayed every decision, every procedure she'd used to justify herself. She'd once believed policy made her right, but now she saw that policy had only been a mask for blindness. Ethan Cole approached Maya quietly. I'm sorry," he said. "I should have spoken up sooner." Maya turned toward him, her eyes kind, but unwavering. "Don't apologize to me, Ethan. Apologize to yourself for staying silent when you knew something was wrong." Ethan lowered his head. Those words would follow him long after the flight ended, a mirror he'd never forget. At 30,000 feet, the engines droned steadily. But below, the world was already on fire. Hundreds of articles, podcasts, and videos began dissecting the incident, asking one question again and again. How can this still happen, and how did she stay so calm? On TV, a psychologist commented, "She didn't react with anger because anger doesn't change systems. Intelligence does. Online." People gave her a name. The Silent CEO, a new symbol of strength and dignity in a world that had forgotten how to listen. Then, Clara's phone rang again, a secure call from Dr. Evelyn Ross, head of Apex Air's Ethics Council. Her voice was tense. "Maya, the video's everywhere. The board's in emergency session. They're trying to blame a system glitch again." "But we both know this isn't about a system," Maya answered quietly. "That's fine. Evelyn, let them meet. I fixed their technical errors once. Now it's time to fix their ethical ones." Clara shivered slightly, not because the words were harsh, but because they were so calm, so certain, as if Maya had already seen the ending and was ready to walk straight into it. The cabin fell quiet again. No one met each other's eyes. Yet deep inside, something new had been planted, a small, quiet seed of awareness, of guilt, and maybe of change. Maya opened her notebook and wrote a few simple lines. "Truth can be hidden. but never extinguished. One wrong word can wound, but the right silence can heal an entire system. As the plane began its descent, no one on board knew what was about to happen next. A secure call, an ethics committee, and a truth far bigger than anyone imagined were waiting below. Because, as Maya had said, this incident was far from over. The Apex Air 247 continued its quiet glide toward the skies above California, but inside first class. No one dared pretend this was a normal flight anymore. The air was thick, heavy, as if every breath carried the weight of something that had been left unsaid. Dr. Maya Lewis sat still in seat 1A, her eyes fixed on the sunlight spilling across the layers of clouds outside. She knew this wasn't just a personal insult. It was a symptom, the very illness she had warned about in her report Ethics Under Pressure, sent to Apex Executive Board the year before, an illness called prejudice protected by policy. From the next row, Clara Nguyen glanced toward Maya. She didn't need words to understand what her boss was thinking. She opened her laptop, connecting to a secure encrypted line. Across the screen, a message appeared. Secure line. Apex Ethics Council. Dr. Evelyn Ross is online, Clara whispered. Maya nodded calmly. Connect her. Seconds later, the tired face of Dr. Evelyn Ross appeared on screen, the chair of Apex Air's Ethics Council, and Maya's former partner in building the company's human equity policy, a framework once praised for pushing equality in aviation. But now, Evelyn's eyes were clouded with fatigue. Maya, her voice cracked, heavy with shame. I've seen the video. She hesitated, then asked softly, She was one of ours, wasn't she? Maya didn't answer right away. Her gaze held steady, calm but piercing. Yes, but she's just the surface. The problem runs deeper. Evelyn sighed, gripping her coffee cup. You don't know the half of it. In the last 3 months, the Ethics Council's received over 20 complaints. Racial bias, favoritism, discriminatory service. Not a single one made it to the executive board. Every case was buried to protect the FAA rating. Clara froze. You mean they've been covering them up? Evelyn nodded, her eyes flicking away from the screen. They're terrified of losing certification or stock value. They tell me, handle it internally, keep it quiet. But the more we handle it internally, the more it rots. The cabin remained silent, but Evelyn's words echoed like thunder inside Maya's mind. Protecting the image by sacrificing the truth that's the most dangerous act of all. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She had written those exact words in her previous report, words no one had ever bothered to read carefully. Now, that warning had come to life, embodied in a so-called system error that wore a human face. Evelyn's voice trembled. You understand? Maya, no one on the board will touch this. We're talking about an entire chain, managers, supervisors, PR, all complicit. One exposed mistake could cost them hundreds of millions. Maya said nothing. The afternoon sunlight pierced through the clouds, glinting in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, deliberate. So everything I warned them about has come true. They thought hiding the flaws would preserve their reputation, but it's their silence that's suffocating the soul of this company. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with guilt. I tried to change it, Maya, but no one stands up. They told me, don't make it a big deal. Don't let the FAA get involved. Maya turned to Clara. Record everything. Clara nodded and pressed the button. Maya, Evelyn continued, voice shaking. Be careful. If you go public, they'll come after you. You know how this works. The people at the top never like the truth coming from below. Maya's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. Then maybe they've forgotten. I'm not below them. Clara looked up surprised, almost in awe. It wasn't arrogance. It was a quiet reminder that sometimes the one they underestimated was the very person holding the system's keys. Maya's tone deepened, steady as stone Evelyn. I won't let this get buried under internal handling. I don't want anyone fired. I just want this company to face itself. If we keep covering the truth, we become no different than Rachel hiding behind policy to justify injustice. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Her voice trembled, but conviction returned. All right, I'll send you everything, internal memos, reports, complaint logs. You'll know what to do. The call ended. Clara slowly closed the laptop, but Evelyn's last words still echoed in her mind. They're afraid of the FA. She turned to Maya, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you going to do? Maya didn't turn from the window. I don't have to do much. I just have to let the truth air itself. Once justice has an audience, no one can turn it off. Noah, who had been quietly watching from across the aisle, spoke softly. You know, my video just passed 10 million views. The entire country's talking about you. Maya looked at him, calm as ever. Then let them talk about what truly matters, why someone like me still gets questioned for sitting in the seat I paid for. The cabin went still again. Outside, sunlight rippled across the endless sky, bright, serene, infinite. But beneath that sky, a new kind of battle was beginning, not fought with weapons, but with data, truth, and intelligent silence. Maya opened her leather notebook and wrote quietly, Truth can be hidden, but never erased. One careless word can wound. But silence, when it's the right kind, can heal an entire system. When the secure call ended, no one in the cabin suspected that the next confession would come from someone among them, a young crew member, exhausted by silence, about to reveal something that would make the entire system bow its head. When the video call with Dr. Evelyn Ross ended, the first-class cabin fell into an uneasy silence. No more accusations, no more anger, only the quiet, the kind that comes when people are finally left alone with their own conscience. Doctor, Maya Lewis sat still in seat 1A, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the window where the sun was sinking low, painting half the western sky in amber light. She didn't speak yet. Her silence carried weight. It wasn't the silence of defense anymore. It was a new kind of authority, the kind that makes people look inward. Across from her, Ethan Cole stood motionless, his hands clasped tightly together. He had thought of walking away, but something in Maya's eyes, calm, unblaming, yet unyielding, kept him there. He drew a deep breath, gathering the courage to say what had been buried inside him for too long. Dr. Lewis, he began, his voice low and rough with emotion. I need to say this. Not for you, for me. Maya turned toward him, eyes steady, nodding softly, granting him permission to lay down his burden. Ethan glanced around the cabin. A few passengers sat quietly, their heads lowered. Then he spoke, each word deliberate and heavy. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this. I've seen black passengers asked to recheck their tickets, asked if they were sure they were in the right cabin. Some stayed silent and walked away. Some argued and then got labeled as disruptive. I kept telling myself I was just following orders, that I didn't build this system. But now, his voice trembled, I see that my silence was part of that system. Clara looked at him not with judgment, but with quiet empathy. Noah lowered his phone, stopping the recording. This was no longer news. It was a moment of humanity. Ethan's voice shook as he continued, We were trained to protect the brand image, but no one taught us that image means nothing if it's built on humiliation. I remember once an elderly black woman was asked to leave first class just because her clothes looked too ordinary. I saw it happen, and I said nothing. I thought, I just didn't want trouble. But now, looking at you sitting here, Dr. Lewis, all I feel is shame. No one spoke. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin like a heartbeat. And then Maya's voice broke the stillness, soft but clear, each word landing like truth itself. Ethan, the problem isn't seat 1A. She paused, looked directly at him, and continued. The problem is that this system made people believe respect comes with a dress code. The words cut through the air like a fine blade, gentle, but impossible to ignore. Ethan bowed his head. He understood. All those years, he had learned to decide who deserved service by appearance alone, and in doing so, had forgotten what the job was truly about: serving people, not prejudice. Maya tilted her head slightly, her tone low, not angry, but deeply sad. You know, Ethan, I'm not angry at Rachel, and I'm not angry at you. I'm just sorry, because every time someone like me is doubted, a piece of this system's humanity disappears, and good people like you are left to carry that loss. Clara placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. Noah looked down at his notes, not writing anymore. Everyone in that cabin understood this was no longer about one flight. It was a mirror held up to society itself. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper now. I kept telling myself I wasn't a bad person, but I never had the courage to say enough. Now I want to say it enough. This can't keep happening. Maya smiled softly. You just did what many never will. You faced the truth. Outside, the plane pierced through a thin layer of cloud. Sunlight washed over their faces, warm and forgiving like the world itself was exhaling. Ethan lifted his head, his voice steadier now. If there's anything I can do to make this right, please tell me. Maya met his gaze, her words slow and tender, like a lesson meant to last. You don't need to do anything grand. Just don't stay silent again. When you see someone treated unfairly, remember justice begins in the eyes of the witness. Not everyone has power, but everyone can choose what's right. Ethan nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Not tears of guilt, but of awakening. Noah leaned toward Clara, whispering, if this video ever goes viral, the world needs to hear him too. Not just the wrongdoing, the redemption. Maya glanced at them, her expression calm but deep. Exactly. Mistakes deserve to be remembered, but repentance deserves to be shared. No one spoke after that. Only the steady whisper of the wind outside, blending with the quiet breathing of people who had begun to change. In the back row, Rachel sat silently, once the center of chaos. She now bowed her head, not from fear, but from understanding. She had just witnessed something she never thought possible, that justice can arrive in silence, and kindness can wield more power than punishment. The plane kept flying, but no one on board was the same anymore. And when the cell signal returned as they began their descent, a new call came through this time, not to apologize, but to intervene from the highest levels. Because once justice begins to be heard, the system can no longer pretend to be deaf. As Apex Air Flight 247 began its descent, the first-class cabin sat under a heavy silence. But this silence was different. No more excuses, no more careless glances, just a stillness that listened. Ethan Cole's confession lingered in the air. I thought I wasn't wrong, until I realized silence is also a choice, and sometimes it's the wrong one. In seat 1A, Dr. Maya Lewis remained composed. She knew once people begin to truly see the problem, the storm is only just beginning. Outside, the sun melted into gold across the wings, the sky painted with the quiet tension of something inevitable. From row 2, Clara Guyon checked her phone. The screen flashed. An incoming call. Richard Hale Co., Apex Air. Clara met Maya's gaze. Maya nodded once. Put it through. The speaker clicked, and a deep, measured male voice filled the cabin, the tone of a man used to power, but not to being cornered. Maya, I just saw what's happening. First, let me say, on behalf of Apex, I sincerely apologize, but I think we should handle this privately. No need to make more noise than necessary. Maya leaned back, expression unreadable. Her voice was calm, too calm. You say we... Richard, but I'm not sure we share the same definition of transparency. There was a pause. Then Richard's voice softened, the kind of smooth tone executives use when they think charm can fix damage. Maya, this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. We're handling it internally. You don't need to worry. This will be dealt with discreetly. We can discuss a different kind of partnership. Perhaps one that prevents this from hurting the stock. Maya gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. You mentioned protecting the stock price, she said quietly, but not protecting the people. Clara glanced up. She recognized that tone. It wasn't anger. It was the kind of precision that comes from patience sharpened into steel. Maya reached for the seat control and tapped a button. A soft chime. Speaker mode. On. The cabin filled with Richard's voice. He hesitated. Maya, are you on speaker? I don't think you think wrong. Maya cut in soft, but decisive. If you wanted a private conversation, you should have called before your company's prejudice went public nationwide. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines, steady and indifferent. Maya looked straight ahead, voice even and deliberate. You called this an isolated incident. But I have copies of internal emails between you and Daniel Ward, your former compliance officer. You remember those, don't you? A pause. Then Richard's voice brittle, nervous. I don't know what you're talking about. Maya nodded to Clara. Clara opened her laptop and mirrored the screen for everyone to see. The text glowed cold and damning. Temporarily conceal 8 discrimination complaints from Q2. Goal: preserve FAA rating ahead of audit. Daniel Ward, Richard Hale. CC HR head, PR lead. The cabin froze. The air itself felt heavier. Richard's voice cracked, words tumbling out too fast. Maya, listen to me. That was during a crisis. We were protecting the brand. Every major airline does this. Stop. Her voice didn't rise, but it sliced clean through his defense. You just said every company does this. Do you hear what you're justifying? Richard's silence. At the back of the cabin, Noah Carter lifted his phone. This time, he wasn't filming. He was recording. Not for clicks. For the record, Maya continued. Slow and steady. You think this is a PR issue. It's not. This is a moral fracture. And when that spreads, no amount of branding can seal it. I helped build Apex digital infrastructure. I know when corrupted data sits too long, the system collapses. People are no different. Richard, keep blocking the truth long enough, and the company will collapse from within. Richard's tone changed, pleading. Now, Maya, I know you have influence, but if you go public, you'll hurt yourself too. We're in this together, the same boat. Maya turned toward the window, watching the last line of sunlight fade. No, Richard, we're not in the same boat. I'm in the sky, and you're still trying to keep a sinking ship afloat by throwing more stones into it." The words hung there, cutting through the quiet like thunder. No one in the cabin could look up. Even Rachel Holt, who once doubted her, kept her head bowed. Ethan whispered, barely audible, "She's doing what everyone else is too afraid to do." Clara closed the laptop. Maya leaned back, and her final words were calm enough to make the whole room tremble. "You asked if I wanted to handle this privately. No, Richard, I want it handled publicly. Not because I want to win, but because those who were silenced deserve to hear the truth spoken out loud." She tapped the control. "Speaker off." The cabin remained motionless. Ethan's eyes glistened, part shame, part awe. Noah exhaled softly. Clara stared at Maya, realizing that the woman who'd once been told she didn't belong in seat 1A had just made an entire system bow to her. No shouting, no fury, just the unwavering force of truth spoken in a voice too calm to ignore. Outside, the last trace of daylight disappeared as the plane descended toward San Diego. But everyone inside knew when those wheels touched the ground. It wouldn't just mark the end of a flight. It would mark the beginning of something far bigger. Because in just a few minutes, the woman in seat 1A would prove to the world that justice doesn't need a microphone, only the courage to hit speaker. As Apex Air Flight 247 began its descent, the golden glow of sunset spilled through the cabin windows, bathing first class in warm light. But no one was watching the sunset. No one could. This wasn't just another landing. It was the quiet before something much bigger touched down. After the confrontation with Richard Hale, the silence in the cabin was so deep it carried the sound of heartbeats. Dr. Maya Lewis sat still in seat 1A back straight, hands resting lightly on her knees. Her face showed no emotion, but behind her calm eyes, there was movement, a silent current, the kind that comes before a tide of change. Claire Nguyen leaned toward her and whispered, "Are you going to notify them before we land?" Maya smiled faintly. "No need. When true justice is set in motion, it doesn't ask for permission." A few rows behind, Noah Carter glanced at his watch. He knew he was witnessing something rare, a moment where power didn't roar, but spoke softly enough to make an entire system tremble. The ding of the descent signal echoed through the cabin, while everyone else fastened seat belts. Maya unzipped her leather case and pulled out a folder. On the cover, the Apex Air logo, and beneath it, shareholders' authorization, 35% ownership agreement. She placed it neatly on the small tray table before her. Heads turned. Even Rachel Holt, sitting rigid in the corner, lifted her gaze, her face pale, unsure what was about to unfold. Maya opened the document. Her voice was calm, even, but every word carried the weight of finality like the sound of a gavel in a courtroom. For the record, and under legal authority, I am the largest shareholder of Apex Air, holding 35% of company equity, and under that right, I am invoking the Emergency Ethics Clause, Section 12.3 of the Board Charter. Silence thickened. The air seemed to hold still. Maya's eyes found Rachel's. Chief Attendant Rachel Holt, as of this moment. You are suspended and terminated from Apex Air for gross misconduct and violation of ethical standards regarding passenger discrimination. Rachel froze. Her fingers gripped the armrest so tight her knuckles turned white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Maya didn't look away, didn't gloat. She didn't want to see a person fall. She wanted them to see themselves fall in the mirror of consequence. Then she turned her gaze to Ethan Cole. Attendant, Ethan Cole, I am not dismissing you. You made a mistake, but you had the courage to face it. From today, You'll be reassigned to APEC's Internal Ethics and Diversity Compliance Training Program. I want you to teach what you learned here about silence, about awareness, and about courage." Ethan lowered his head, voice trembling. "Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I won't waste that trust." Maya nodded slightly, then turned to Clara. "Send notice to the Independent Audit Office. I want a 5-year internal review, all discrimination complaints, passenger and employee alike. Every email, every report that was overlooked, brought into the light." Clara's fingers flew over the keyboard. In the hush of the cabin, even the click of each key struck like a heartbeat. At the back, Noah Carter, the journalist, watched her eyes steady, reverent. "You just redefined power," he said softly. "No shouting, no orders, just knowing you could." Maya looked at him, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Power isn't for protecting yourself. It's for fixing what hurt others." For a long moment, no one moved. There was no passenger, no crew anymore, only people, stripped bare of titles and pride, all standing inside the reflection of a single truth. Rachel lowered her head. Tears slipped down her face. No one mocked her. No one rejoiced. Her downfall didn't come from punishment, but from realizing she had betrayed the very role meant to protect others. Maya looked at her gently. "Rachel, I don't want to destroy you. I just want you to understand respect isn't a privilege given to those with authority. It's a responsibility carried by those trusted with it." Rachel nodded, silently, tears still falling. Then Ethan reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture small, but enough to soften the entire room. For the first time on this flight, someone touched Rachel, not out of duty, but out of humanity. Clara hit send. A soft ding confirmed transmission. Maya exhaled slowly, as if she had finally set down a weight she'd carried for years. Noah spoke quietly. "Do you think they'll retaliate?" "The ones higher up," Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not with silence this time. Because now, truth has witnesses, and justice has a voice." The plane shuddered gently as it approached the runway. Outside, the last trace of sunlight kissed the distant ocean, its reflection glinting off the cabin window, where Maya's silhouette appeared small, steady, unshakable. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "No one has the right to define another person's worth, especially when that person already knows their own." As Flight 247 touched down in San Diego, the story was far from over. What Maya had just done wasn't a disciplinary act. It was the first move in a complete transformation. A movement that would soon be known across the aviation world as Project Clear Horizon, a reform that would forever change how justice is defined in the skies. The sound of the landing gear touching down in San Diego echoed through the cabin like a full stop at the end of a long sentence, or perhaps the first word of a brand new chapter. Outside the window, the last light of sunset spread gold across the runway. Inside first class, silence lingered, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of people who had witnessed change. Dr. Maya Lewis stayed seated in 1A, seatbelt fastened, eyes closed. In that still moment, she wasn't thinking about power, or media, or corporate shares. Only one thought passed through her mind. If I don't do it, no one will. When the plane came to a stop, passengers began gathering their things, but no one rushed to leave. They looked at her. The small, calm woman who had just made one of America's largest airlines confront its own reflection. Ethan Cole stepped forward, voice low but full of emotion. "Dr. Lewis, I don't know what to say except thank you. I used to think justice was something far away, But today, I saw it in the way you stayed calm and told the truth. Maya smiled softly. Thank you, Ethan. Keep that feeling. Because justice doesn't just live in a courtroom, it lives in every action we choose to make right. She stood, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the exit with Clara Nian beside her. At the back of the plane, Noah Carter filmed one last shot. No drama, no chaos, just a woman walking into the sunset, carrying the quiet belief that justice can be rewritten if someone stays calm long enough to listen to what's right. The boardroom lights were harsh and white. 12 executives sat around the long table, their faces tight with unease. Maya stood before the screen, voice steady and decisive. We've lived too long inside an ethical blind spot, but starting today, I'm launching a full reform program, the Clear Horizon Initiative. Behind her, the screen came alive, a vast blue sky with white letters that read, Transparency, Humanity, Accountability. In the next 45 days, she continued, every employee from flight attendants to pilots to management will undergo retraining in social awareness, equity, and cultural respect. This isn't a PR workshop. It's a re-education on how to see people again. Clara took over, clicking through the slides. 45-day internal ethics and reflection training. 12-month audit of all historical discrimination cases. Quarterly transparency reports publicly released. Maya added, her tone calm but firm. We don't fix mistakes with press releases. We fix them with action. Every error is a reminder, and every reminder is a chance to be better. At the far end of the table sat Richard Hale, the now former COO. He said nothing. His eyes stayed down because there were no words left to defend with. Maya looked at him, not with anger, but with quiet conviction. Richard, if you truly want to save Apex, don't talk. Start listening. The room went still, so still, it felt like even the air was holding its breath. 3 days later, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, officially announced an investigation into Apex Air's discrimination and cover-up practices. That night's national broadcasts all led with the same headline, A Black CEO Forces America's Largest Airline to Confront the Darkness Within. On social media, Noah Carter's 6-minute video from Flight 247 hit 80 million views in just 48 hours. But what caught Maya's attention wasn't the number. It was the comments. She didn't raise her voice, yet the whole world heard her. For the first time, justice looks peaceful. That evening, in her small hotel room, Maya read those comments one by one, not to bask in praise, but to remind herself that justice spoken through wisdom can reach even the most distant hearts. Clara entered, setting down a steaming cup of tea. Are you tired? Maya smiled faintly. Of course, but this kind of tired feels better than the exhaustion of silence. The lamplight caught her profile, the face of a woman who had used calm to open the door to reform for an entire industry. Within a week, other airlines began adopting the Clear Horizon model. Major newspapers called it the most human reform in the history of U.S. aviation. The FAA announced new national standards, the Crew Ethics and Communication Code, and somewhere out there, countless passengers, people once humiliated or ignored, began to whisper words they hadn't dared to say before I deserve respect. Standing by her office window, Maya watched planes lift off into the evening sky above San Diego, smooth, quiet, equal. Beside her, Noah Carter was setting up his notes for his upcoming documentary, Clear Horizon, The Sky Within. He asked softly, "Do you feel satisfied, Doctor?" Maya shook her head. satisfied. No, I just know I did the right thing. But justice, Noah, is never finished. It's still flying somewhere in the same sky we all share. Noah looked out the window at a plane ascending through the clouds. And maybe this time, he said quietly, the sky truly belongs to everyone. Outside. The ocean breeze swept through the palm trees, lining Apex Air's new headquarters. Flags bearing the words Clear Horizon Initiative fluttered in the sunlight. But inside Maya's heart, Justice still had one more flight to make, because she knew forgiveness and redemption are the highest altitudes of justice. And just a few weeks later, she would invite Rachel Holt, the very woman who once wronged her, to return. Not for punishment, but to learn, together, how to be human again. The morning breeze in San Diego carried the salt of the sea and the faint aroma of coffee drifting up from the cafe below the Apex Air headquarters. In her corner office, its glass walls overlooking the runway, Dr. Maya Lewis sat quietly, watching one plane after another rise into the blue. Each one, she thought, was more than a flight. Each one was a symbol of people trying to rise above their past. The Clear Horizon Initiative had reached its midpoint. Hundreds of employees had completed their ethics retraining. Many who had once stayed silent were now speaking up, sharing what they had seen, what they had ignored, and what they had learned to face. No more fear of retaliation. No more shame in admitting mistakes. Change was spreading through Apex not through slogans, but through the way people began looking at one another. And yet, one person remained silent, Rachel Holt. Since the day she was dismissed, Rachel had disappeared from the public eye. No interviews, no statements, no defenses. Only one short message sent to Maya. If you want, I'm ready to face it. That afternoon, Maya agreed to meet her. No press, no cameras. Just two women once divided by prejudice, now sitting across from each other in a quiet training room at Apex New Ethics Center. Rachel entered, thinner than before, her face pale but honest. She stood straight, hands clasped. Dr. Lewis, I don't even know where to begin. Maya gestured to the chair opposite hers. You don't need to begin, she said calmly. You just need to be honest. Rachel looked down, took a deep breath. That day, I thought I was just doing my job. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of judgment. Afraid my superiors would reprimand me. Afraid that first-class passengers would complain if I didn't protect the brand image. So I chose the easiest path. I doubted you, instead of defending what was right. Maya didn't interrupt. She listened not as a victor, but as a witness. Rachel's words weren't excuses. They were a confession from someone finally learning to face herself. After being fired, Rachel continued, voice trembling. I lost everything: my job, my friends, my reputation. But what scared me most wasn't losing those things. It was realizing that I had become the very thing I once despised: prejudice. Her eyes glistened as she looked up. You had every right to destroy me, but you didn't. Why? Maya met her gaze. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, because I didn't come to destroy you, Rachel. I came to fix what created you. The room felt utterly still. That single line, gentle, unflinching, wasn't about grace. It was a philosophy. Justice, in Maya's world, was never about revenge. It was about repair. Maya rose, opened a folder, and slid it across the table. On the cover, Ethical Rehabilitation Program, Apex Air. This is the new ethics rehabilitation track, she said. I want you to join, not as a victim, but as someone who has fallen and learned. I need you to tell your story, to help others see how prejudice hides in the smallest actions. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened the file. You really believe I can do that? Maya nodded gently. I believe in people. If someone can be wrong, they can also be right again. The question is whether they have the courage to rise from their own mistakes. Rachel bowed her head, tears falling onto the page, not of guilt, but of release. At that same hour, Ethan Cole, the former flight attendant from Flight 247, stood before a class of 30 new trainees. He spoke plainly, no embellishments, no pride. I didn't shout, I didn't insult anyone, but I stayed silent, and that silence hurt someone. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. Don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong. If you understand more today than you did yesterday, that's already growth. From the back of the room, the door opened quietly. Rachel stepped inside. Ethan looked up, startled, then smiled and nodded. No words were needed. Her presence said it all sometimes. Forgiveness is the strongest form of justice. In the main office, Clara Nguyen scanned through new reports, her voice full of awe as she spoke to Maya. You know, in just 3 weeks, we've had over 200 volunteers sign up for the ethics program. Even staff from other airlines are sending thank you letters. Maya smiled softly, eyes turning toward the window, where planes glided through the clear blue sky. Clear horizon, she said slowly. It's not just a corporate reform. Clara, it's a reminder that people can learn to be kind again. Undi. That evening, Noah Carter, the journalist who had filmed the viral video, called her. I saw your meeting with Rachel today. He said, that line, I didn't come to destroy you. I came to fix what created you. I think that's going to open the documentary. Maya was quiet for a few seconds, then replied, if you make that film, Noah, don't make it about me. Make it about everyone who found the courage to face themselves. Justice doesn't need heroes. It just needs honesty. The next day, Rachel Holt officially returned to Apex Air, this time as an ethics program advisor. The press called it a bold act of human leadership. At the press conference, Maya said only one sentence. If we want to change a system, we must first save the people inside it. Then she fell silent, as she always did. No defense, no pride, just purpose. Below the stage, young employees applauded. In their eyes, Maya wasn't a victor. She was something rarer, someone who knew when to stop fighting and start teaching. As the first Clear Horizon reports went public, the ripple spread far beyond Apex Air. Airlines across the country began adopting similar models. Unions, training centers, and flight academies all followed suit. The justice Maya planted had begun to blossom not just within one company, but across the entire American sky. 2 months had passed since the Clear Horizon initiative officially took flight. Across America's skies, Apex airplanes still soared as they always had, but inside them, something had changed forever. The change didn't come from slogans or from press conferences with bright lights and applause. It came from the way people looked at each other, from a nod, a smile, a quiet kindness exchanged between strangers. Small things, but the kind doctor Maya Lewis had always believed in, because to her, no system could ever be truly fair if people hadn't yet learned how to see one another with humanity. In the soft light of dawn, inside Apex's new training facility in San Diego, Ethan Cole stood before a group of fresh recruits, smiling faintly. Behind him, the digital board displayed a single line in bold white letters. Justice doesn't begin with power. It begins with kindness. Ethan looked over the young, diverse faces that mirrored the world outside the window. You know, he said, 2 months ago, I was standing right where you are, except my classroom was a real flight cabin. Back then, I didn't know what justice was. I just knew how to follow orders. But today, I'm not here to teach. I'm here to tell a story. Because when you realize that a simple smile can change an entire flight, you'll understand that your job was never small. The room was quiet, not the tense kind of silence, but the kind that comes when people listen with their hearts. At the back of the room, Rachel Holt sat taking notes. Her face looked calmer, now older, wiser. She was no longer the woman who had once judged by appearances. Now, as Apex Ethics Rehabilitation Advisor, she co-led the perception rehab courses guiding others to unlearn the subtle biases she once carried. And every time Ethan spoke about mistakes that once seemed too small to matter, Rachel would nod, confirming each lesson through her own lived truth. There was no pride in her eyes anymore, only a quiet resolve to rebuild what she had once broken. On the 20th floor of Apex HQ, Maya Lewis studied the latest internal report glowing on her screen. After 60 days, the numbers told a story. Passenger complaints down by 60%. Employee satisfaction up by nearly 70%. Voluntary participation in ethics programs, 92%. Clara Nguyen entered with 2 coffees, her tone bright. These are the best results Apex has seen in 10 years, she said, grinning. Maya nodded, still focused on the data. What makes me happiest, she said softly, isn't the numbers. It's that people are choosing to do the right thing even when no one's watching. Clara smiled. You always said justice spreads like light. Looks like you were right. Maya chuckled. Not me. Clara. Humanity. It finally decided to look at itself again. Word of Clear Horizon had now reached beyond Apex. Other airlines were calling, asking for consultation. Some at first treated it as a PR strategy, but when they saw how Apex had changed, they realized this was no campaign. It was a cultural reset. At the FAA headquarters, Dr. Evelyn Ross led a press conference to announce new federal standards inspired by Maya's program. We call it the Lewis Standard, a code of ethics for communication and fairness in aviation. For a moment, the press room was silent. Then came the applause. Not for Maya as a person, but for what her philosophy represented. That justice could, in fact, be rewritten through kindness. That night, in her suburban home outside San Diego, Maya sat on her porch, listening to the waves rolling in the distance. Noah Carter, the journalist who had captured the 6-minute viral video that started it all, arrived with his camera bag and a gentle smile. The documentary's almost done, he said. I just added the part about the FAA approving the Lewis Standard. Everyone's talking about you now. Maya shook her head with a light laugh. They shouldn't. I didn't create the light. I just flipped the switch. The light came from everyone else. Noah leaned on the porch rail, watching her for a moment. You know what moves people the most in the film? It's not when you expose the company, not even when you fired anyone. It's when you said to Rachel, I didn't come to destroy you. I came to fix what created you. In a world full of anger, that line reminded people that mercy still exists. Maya didn't answer. She just looked up at the night sky, where a single plane crossed the stars, its lights blinking like the heartbeat of the world. You know what I think of every time I see a plane, she said softly. Maybe someone on board once stayed silent, once made a mistake, and now they're trying to live better. If that's true, then justice is already flying with them. No. Himems. 2 months after the reform began, Apex Air was no longer a name tied to scandal. It had become a symbol of rebirth. Business magazines wrote from racial crisis to cultural revolution. Apex Air redefines humanity in the service industry. From New York to Seattle, other airlines launched their own Clear Horizon-style programs. Even finance firms, hospitals, and tech corporations began adopting its framework. They called it the Lewis Effect. One quiet weekend afternoon, Maya stopped by the Apex training facility. Ethan was wrapping up a lesson, with Rachel standing beside him as his co-instructor. When they noticed her enter, the entire room rose to their feet, applauding. Not for a CEO, but for the person who had made them believe that ethics wasn't taught by rulebooks, but spread by example. Maya smiled and said softly, "Don't clap for me. Clap for yourselves because you chose justice when no one forced you to." The applause continued soft, steady, and real. That night, back home, Maya's phone rang. The caller ID Rachel Holt. It was the first time Rachel had reached out since the rehabilitation program ended. Her voice trembled slightly. "Dr. Lewis, someone invited me to speak on a talk show to tell our story. I wanted to ask, what do you think I should say?" Maya smiled, looking out at the night sky where another plane drifted quietly across the stars. "Just tell the truth, Rachel. Because the truth, no matter how gentle, is still strong enough to change the world." As the Lewis effect spread across America, conversations about ethics, fairness, and compassion began to surface everywhere on talk shows, university panels, podcasts, and social media feeds. People weren't just talking about Dr. Maya Lewis, the black CEO who dared to stand for justice. They were also talking about Rachel Holt, once the face of prejudice, now living proof that people can change. One quiet evening, Maya sat at home when her phone rang. On the other end, Rachel's voice trembled, hesitant but steady. "Dr. Lewis, they invited me to a talk show. I don't know if I should go. I'm afraid people still hate me." Maya paused for a few moments. Outside, the San Diego wind carried the faint sound of waves, steady, rhythmic, like the breath of forgiveness itself. "Rachel," Maya said gently, "people might still hate what you did, but they'll listen if you speak the truth. You don't need to talk to be forgiven. Speak so that someone making the same mistake today knows they can still come back." Rachel didn't reply right away. She looked down at a folded note, one she'd kept since the ethics rehabilitation program. Maya's handwriting read, "I didn't come to destroy you, but to fix what created you." 3 days later, the talk show aired live across the country. The stage was simple, no flashy lights, no laughter track, just warmth and quiet dignity. Rachel sat beneath soft studio lighting, wearing a plain gray suit, no makeup beyond what the cameras required. The host opened, "2 months ago, you were at the center of a scandal that shook the aviation industry. Today, you return not as a villain, but as someone rebuilding herself. What changed you?" Rachel looked up. Her voice trembled slightly, but every word rang true. "I once confused power with worth. I thought people in first class had to look like they belonged there. That belief blinded me. I didn't see human beings. I only saw my own prejudice." The audience stayed silent. Rachel drew a breath and continued, "When I was fired, I was angry. I blamed the media. I blamed the system. I even blamed Dr. Lewis. But when I joined the ethics rehab program, I realized the worst thing wasn't losing my job. It was living my life without knowing right from wrong. I thought I was a victim of criticism, but I was really a victim of my own thinking. Her eyes shimmered with tears. When Dr. Lewis said to me, "I didn't come to destroy you, but to fix what created you," I didn't understand it then. Now I do. She didn't punish me. She gave me my last chance to be better. The camera panned to the audience. Several people were wiping their eyes. The host asked softly, "Do you have a message for Dr. Lewis?" Rachel nodded, her voice breaking. "Thank you for not choosing anger. If you had treated me the way I treated you, there would be no me sitting here today. I used to think justice was punishment. Now I know true justice is when someone teaches you how to be human again." That talk show became one of the highest-rated broadcasts of the year. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. The next morning, newspapers didn't run headlines like "Disgraced Attendant Cries on Live TV." Instead, every major outlet printed a single quote across their front pages. "I confused power with the value of a person." The line went viral, sparking a nationwide dialogue. Universities held ethics panels. Churches, schools, and social organizations hosted discussions on the compassion reform. People called it the Holt reflection, the ripple effect of one woman brave enough to face herself in public. A few days later, Maya found a small, unmarked envelope in her office inbox. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dr. Lewis, I'm Greg Sullivan, the passenger in seat 1B that day. I laughed at you. I thought I was joking, but every time I see that video, I can't laugh anymore. I see a calm woman being humiliated, and a fool who thought he had the right to judge her. I'm sorry, not just for what I said, but for all the times I stayed silent when I saw injustice around me. Thank you for teaching me that kindness doesn't make us weak. It makes us stronger." Maya folded the letter carefully, smiling faintly. She placed it beside a framed photo of the Clear Horizon team, the motto beneath it glinting in the morning light: "The sky belongs to everyone." The next day, during Apex Air's weekly leadership briefing, Clara Guyon opened the company's internal bulletin, grinning. "Dr. Lewis." After that talk show, volunteer sign-ups for the ethics program doubled. The FAA is considering making it a nationwide standard. Maya nodded, calm but warm. People change. "Clara, the best part is they're changing because they want to, not because they're told to." At that moment, Ethan Cole entered, holding a new announcement flyer. "Dr. Lewis, Rachel wants both of us to join her next week for a live discussion. Justice is not retaliation." She said, "She can't tell that story alone." Maya smiled. "That's a good sign. Ethan, when the one who was wrong and the one who was hurt can share the same stage, justice has already traveled halfway to healing." That evening, Noah Carter sent Maya an email. Attached was the trailer for his upcoming documentary, Clear Horizon, The Power of Grace. The final shot faded in with Rachel's voice. "I used to think power earned respect, but it's kindness and humility that make people remember you." Maya watched in silence, then closed her laptop. Outside her window, the night sky stretched wide plains gliding through the dark, their blinking lights soft and steady, like tiny beacons of humanity refusing to go out. She whispered, almost to herself, "Justice doesn't only live in courts or on social media. It lives in the moment. One person admits they were wrong, and another chooses to forgive." 2 weeks later, Maya flew again. Same route, same seat 1A, but the sky felt different. This time, the seat beside her wasn't occupied by the arrogant Greg Sullivan of the past. It was Noah Carter, preparing to film the final chapter of Clear Horizon. Together, they would tell the story from one woman's humiliation in first class to the quiet revolution that changed the entire American sky. 6 months after the launch of the Clear Horizon initiative, America was still talking about the journey of Dr. Maya Lewis, the woman who changed how an entire industry viewed humanity. The story seemed to have come to a close, but sometimes the most beautiful endings are the ones that bring us back to where it all began. That morning, the sky over New York City was a perfect blue. At Apex Air's domestic terminal, travelers hurried past each other, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. At the first-class counter, a young attendant looked up, then froze for half a second. There she was, the woman with the calm smile, the one whose name had become synonymous with change, Dr. Maya Lewis. "Good morning, Dr. Lewis," the attendant said respectfully. "It's an honor to serve you. Your seat is 1A. Maya smiled softly. 1A. Huh, I thought I didn't quite fit that seat. The attendant blushed, and then both women laughed. No suspicious glances, no whispered comments, just warmth and quiet respect, flowing through the air like sunlight. On the flight from New York to San Diego, Maya boarded alongside Noah Carter, the journalist who had been documenting her journey from the very beginning. He was filming the final chapter of his documentary, Clear Horizon, The Power of Grace. Noah looked around the cabin and smiled. It's strange, isn't it? Same seat, same airline, same route, but the world feels completely different. Maya gazed out the window, sunlight dancing across the wing. No, Noah, she said quietly. The world hasn't changed. People have. This time, they just chose to see it with different eyes. Noah adjusted his camera, his lens focusing on her, the woman who had turned humiliation into a movement of ethics, empathy, and reform. The plane lifted off. The cabin was calm, harmonious, nothing like the tense silence of that flight months ago. The flight attendants were new faces, but they all knew exactly who sat in seat 1A. They didn't look at her like a celebrity, but with the pride of people who knew her story had changed the uniform they wore. A young flight attendant approached, smiling. Dr. Lewis, I read every page of the Clear Horizon training manual. Thank you for helping us understand that our job isn't just about service, it's about respect. Maya nodded warmly. There's nothing to thank me for. You're the ones making it real. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, Noah turned his camera back on. Dr. Lewis, he began. Did you ever imagine that one ticket, one small misunderstanding, could change so many lives? Maya smiled, eyes distant, thoughtful. I think great things often begin with something small. A look, a word, a moment of doubt. But those small things, if we're calm enough to look deeply, can become the beginning of awareness. Noah paused his camera, his tone softening. Do you ever feel angry, thinking back to what happened? Maya shook her head. No, I was never angry. I only felt sad that it took us so long to understand respect should never be a privilege. Her words hung in the air. The camera captured her sitting quietly by the window, the sunlight glowing on her face, serenity etched into every line. Weeks later, in San Diego, Apex Air held a modest ceremony to announce the Clear Horizon Fund, a foundation dedicated to supporting people who had suffered discrimination in the workplace. It was Maya's idea, funded through the profits of Noah's documentary and the dividends she voluntarily gave up from her shares. There was no red carpet, no flashing lights, only a simple banner behind her that read, "The sky belongs to everyone." Standing before an audience of employees, FOA officials, and representatives from other airlines, Maya spoke softly. This fund isn't just for those who were wronged. It exists to remind us that sometimes the ones who need saving most aren't the people who were hurt, but the ones who caused the hurt, because no one ever taught them how to see others through compassion. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with long, heartfelt applause. After the ceremony, Rachel Holt, now a national ethics advisor, stepped forward and embraced Maya. "Thank you," she whispered. "Without you, I'd still be the person who couldn't forgive herself." Maya smiled gently. "No, Rachel, you're the reason the world believes people can change." Ethan Cole and Claire Nguyen joined them, standing side by side. They didn't need words. They all knew the truth. This story had grown far beyond a single flight, a single airline, or even a single scandal. It had become a living symbol, proof that humanity can repair itself when given the chance. That evening, Maya stood alone on the rooftop balcony, watching planes lift into the fading light. The sky hadn't changed, only the hearts beneath it had. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Justice isn't revenge. It's when everyone finds the seat they deserve in life." The last rays of sun touched her face, soft, steady, radiant, and far above, a jet streaked across the orange horizon, bearing the new Apex Air logo, bold letters that read "Clear Horizon." A story that began with one seat now ended with the entire sky. That night, during the final interview for the documentary, a reporter asked Dr. Lewis, "If you could redefine the word justice, what would you say?" Maya smiled, her eyes distant, reflecting the glow of the evening sky. "Justice isn't revenge," she said softly. "It's making sure no one is ever denied their rightful seat in life." As the last light of day stretched across the runway of San Diego International Airport, an Apex Air 247 touched down softly. Golden rays shimmered on the aircraft's body. The words "Clear Horizon" gleaming like a promise, a reminder that every journey, no matter how it begins, can still land in the light if people are brave enough to change. Inside the first-class cabin, Dr. Maya Lewis unbuckled her seatbelt. She had just finished filming the final interview for the documentary Clear Horizon, The Power of Grace. The last question still lingered in the quiet air, simple in words, yet vast in meaning. "Dr. Lewis, if you had to redefine justice, what would you say?" Maya didn't answer right away. Outside, the clouds thinned, revealing a burning red horizon. Then, in that calm, resonant tone, the kind that sounds like peace, "After a long war," she said, "justice isn't revenge. It's making sure no one is ever denied their seat in life." For a few moments, no one spoke. Even the camera crew froze, sensing that what she'd said wasn't just an answer. It was the essence of everything they had witnessed. From a single questioned seat to a movement that transformed an entire industry, Maya had turned pain into philosophy, rewriting justice not as punishment for the past, but as an invitation to a fairer future. When the plane landed, Noah Carter, the filmmaker and Maya's steadfast companion, turned to her. "You know," he said quietly, "when you said that, I swear everything went silent. Maybe because each of us was wondering, are we sitting in the right seat of our own lives?" Maya smiled faintly, her gaze still distant. "Maybe that's what justice really does. Noah, it doesn't make others lose. It helps people find where they truly belong." The plane rolled to a stop. The door opened. Warm air swept through the cabin, carrying the faint scent of the Pacific. Passengers stood up, collected their bags, but no one spoke. It felt as if they had all just listened to a sermon without words. At the arrival gate, reporters were waiting, but they didn't crowd or shout like before. They simply stood, cameras steady, as Maya stepped out in a light gray suit, simple, poised, radiant. A young journalist approached, his voice respectful. "Dr. Lewis, after everything that's happened, what's the biggest change you've seen?" Maya looked at him for a moment before replying softly. "The biggest change isn't in policy or law. It's in the eyes of people. I used to see suspicion, now I see listening. And when people truly see each other with respect, justice doesn't need to be enforced. It simply exists." The reporter nodded silently. Beside him stood Rachel Holt, once the face of Prejudice, now the national advisor for workplace ethics. This time, she didn't shy away from the cameras. She looked straight into the lens, her voice steady. Justice was never far away. It begins the moment we admit we were wrong and realize we still have a chance to make it right. The cameras captured that moment, two women who once stood on opposite sides of judgment, now standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the same light, not to relive the past, but to remind the world that the future can be rewritten. That evening, Maya returned to the Clear Horizon Fund office. Inside, Clara Nguyen was working late, sorting through new applications letters from across the country. They came from people who had been mistreated for their skin color, dismissed for their background, or quietly excluded because they didn't look the part. Clara handed Maya a new letter, written in shaky handwriting. "I'm a black woman working in hospitality. I used to think silence was the safest way to survive. But when I heard you say, justice isn't revenge, it's making sure no one is denied their seat in life, I decided to speak to my manager, not to demand fairness for myself, but to help them see how to treat others better." Maya read the letter carefully, then smiled. "Sometimes," she said, "justice doesn't need a courtroom. It only needs one person brave enough to stand up and another willing to listen." Clara looked at her, eyes warm. "You know, Maya, maybe you're the one who taught justice how to smile." Maya chuckled softly, her eyes resting on a framed photo on the wall. Apex Air 247 captured in the morning light, the place where everything began. A month later. Clear Horizon. The Power of Grace premiered nationwide. No one expected it to become a cultural landmark within a week. Millions tuned in. Older generations, those who had lived through America's most divided years, wrote in by the thousands. They said the film reminded them of the times they stayed silent in the face of injustice, and that maybe it wasn't too late to do better. On stage at the premiere, Noah Carter spoke simply. "I used to think justice belonged to courts and laws. But watching Dr. Lewis stay calm in the face of humiliation, I learned that justice, in truth, is a story of the heart." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Maya bowed her head gently, not as a hero, but as a witness, because she knew the applause wasn't for her. It was for something greater, for the belief that kindness can heal even a broken system. Later that night, Maya stepped outside the theater. Above her, planes glided silently across the stars, their blinking lights tracing hope through the dark. Nearby, a little white boy tugged his mother's hand and pointed upward. "Mom, why do they call it Clear Horizon?" His mother smiled. "Because it's a sky everyone can see, and no one's ever stopped from flying. Maya smiled softly and walked away through the crowd, her heart at peace not from triumph, but from completion. The western sky burned orange, the color of sunset, and the beginning of another dawn. The sky belongs to everyone. No longer just a slogan of Apex Air, it had become the declaration of a generation. That justice doesn't live in loud speeches, but in quiet moments when people finally see each other and know that no one at all, deserves to be left out of the sky. The story of Dr. Maya Lewis isn't just the journey of a black woman reclaiming her dignity. It's proof that intellect can replace anger and compassion can heal even a broken system. When insulted, Maya didn't shout back. She didn't retaliate. She let truth speak for itself, and that calm strength made the world stop and listen. She didn't just win inside a first-class cabin. She changed how thousands of people understand dignity, power, and respect. The deepest message her story leaves behind is this: justice doesn't come from revenge. It comes from helping others see the true worth of a human being. And maybe each of us, no matter who we are or where we come from, has our own seat 1A in life, a seat that represents self-respect, faith, and grace amid the turbulence of the world. If you've ever been doubted, judged for your appearance, your color, or your circumstances, remember Maya. Don't let anger define you. Let dignity and wisdom lead the way. Because sometimes, when we stay silent at the right moment, the world has no choice but to listen. Thank you for watching until the end. If you believe that respect isn't a privilege, but a basic human right, like, share, and subscribe to join us in spreading more stories of silent justice where kindness speaks louder than rage.